Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Brains in Balance, Integrating Well-Being and Academics for Student Success. We are excited that you are here with us today. My name is Dr. Marion Smith Jr., and I have the honor and the privilege of serving as the Chief Learning Officer here at Thrively, and I'll be the host and moderator for today's session. As I said a little bit at the onset, today we're going to delve into the neuroscience behind the integration and the interplay between two topics that are often at the opposite ends of the learning and teaching conversation, and that is well-being and academic learning and academic success. And so before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to share a little bit about Thrively and cover a few logistics just to ensure that we have a smooth and enjoyable webinar experience. And so Thrively was founded on a core philosophy that every child has a genius and they deserve to thrive. And so at Thrively, it really is what's strong with you, not what's wrong with you. Our core mission is to bring a paradigm shift in education through asset-based learning. And we do this by creating strengths-based, joyful, and hopeful learning environments that impact academic outcomes. At Thrively, we created the industry's first strengths assessment that unlocks the positive learning identities and strengths of every student. We measure hope not as an emotion, but as a cognitive trait with our Hope Index, which helps develop agency and pathways. And lastly, we ensure emotional security with our well-being check-in. Additionally, as a strengths-based, learner-centered platform, we developed a digital portfolio that captures a student's holistic K through 12 learning journey, supported by over 80,000 minutes of standards-based aligned, ready-to-use lessons and content. And we provide actionable metrics for you to be able to track and support the key enabling conditions needed to positively impact learning. And so with that, I would like to introduce you to our special guest and speaker. You see me smiling from ear to ear right now for our webinar. So we are excited to hear and learn from Jazmin Hernandez Lavezzo. Jazmin is a director of partner impact at the Center for Whole Child Education, a part of Arizona State University's Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College. She is deeply committed to whole child design and purpose and supporting the wellness of adults who serve our youth. Jazmin joined Turnaround for Children, a precursor to the Center for Whole Child Education in 2021. In her current role, Jazmin leads statewide and national projects around literacy and integrating academics and whole child education. Prior to joining Turnaround, Jazmin worked in schools in the Los Angeles and San Francisco Bay Area. She has taught pre-K, elementary, and middle school. She's also served as a district leader, elementary school administrator, founding lead teacher, instructional coach, and family coordinator, and has taught ESL to adults. And so throughout her career, Jazmin has a core belief that all students are brilliant and that school should support a whole child purpose. I am smiling from ear to ear because from one educator to another, it's always exciting to welcome those who are scholar practitioners. And so with that, welcome, Jazmin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. Hi, everybody. So glad to see you this afternoon. If you're here live, thanks for making time to join us. And if you're watching later, hi, so glad you made time to hop on and watch the recording. Give me just 1 second to share my screen and get set up. While I'm doing that, get yourself some water, take a deep breath. 3:38 Pacific on a Tuesday. So take a second to take care of yourself.
And 6:38 p.m. Eastern time. And
Yes.
so if everyone who's listening, if you are ready, if you could just tap or type a 1 in the chat for us. Like we are ready, we are engaged, we are ready for this session. So I see ones, I need to see a flood of ones, a flood of ones, a flood of ones. So we are ready to engage in Brains in the Balance. So all yours, Jazmin.
Perfect. Dr. Smith, you can see my screen. Yes, just want to make
Yes,
sure.
ma'am, yes.
Super. Okay. So I want you to remember this today as we dive into the session, Brains in Balance, integrating well-being and academics for student success. Well-being fuels learning. So underscore stamp well-being fuels learning. That's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we dive in, you're going to hear me say later in the session that trust is the antidote to stress. So to build trust among this group and increase our oxytocin, we're going to connect with each other before we dive into the work. So I want you to think about a time when you engaged in deep learning and what were some of the enabling conditions that allowed you to have that experience. Just take a second to think. And when you're ready, share something in the chat. A moment where maybe you forgot about time, you found yourself maybe stepping back thinking, this is incredible. Elizabeth says she was in the company of others. Laura's talking about art. Yeah, we are all artists. Collaborating with your team, supported by a mentor, a shared passion. So start thinking about those threads that we're pulling out. What do you see is coming on? A deep learning experience. I have the privilege of being a mom to a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. So every day after school, I get to hear about their deep learning, and I hear about something that their teacher shared with them. They got to sit at a special table. They got to learn with new materials. I get to hear about these deeply engaged learning experiences, hands-on reflection, no time constraints. Yes. Okay, so remember that, hang on to that. And we start with that question because that we have found that in order for our students to engage in deep learning, we need to tap into their cognitive, their social, emotional, and affective skill building. As a teacher, I knew in my classroom that I had to ensure my students felt safe, that they felt supportive when they were trying something new or grappling with something new. We know that deep learning is relevant, it's personal, it's challenging, and it connects to our whole being as a learner. So hold this experience that you had as a learner as we dive in today. But before we dive in, it is 3:40 or 6:40 or 5:40. Let's pause. And I used to skip these, so don't skip it. Don't skip it. Don't check your email. Just engage for a mindful moment of box breathing together. It's just 1 minute. Thanks for doing that with me. So we're going to talk about well-being with students, but first, I want you to remember your well-being. When you're an educator, you do everything all day, evenings, weekends, in service of young people. If you're a leader, service of the educators in your building. So we want to remind you of what I said earlier, that well-being fuels learning. That means your well-being too. We're always learning. We're learning in this next 45 minutes together. We are always trying to improve our practice. We need to ensure that our well-being is taken care of. So I encourage you to take a mindful moment at least once a day, just for yourself. Use your breath. It's such a powerful tool. Nourish your body with a cleansing breath. And this is something you can do with kiddos, with yourself, with your team, before you start a planning meeting, before you start giving each other feedback, anything, anytime you need a moment, just remember your well-being is important too. So, like Dr. Smith said, we were an organization called Turnaround for Children. We were founded about 20 years ago, and we were founded in New York City by Dr. Pamela Cantor. And she wanted to study the effects of trauma on young people after the September 11 attacks in New York City. And essentially, she began this journey of realizing and creating tools and supports for students who had experienced ongoing trauma in their lives, and how this was something that we had to do in schools that we had not been equipped to do before. We had to ensure that we were centering the child, because students who experienced ongoing trauma and stress were not set up at a neurobiological level to learn and to thrive in the ways that they deserved. So for 20 years, we've been supporting educators across the country. And now we are the Center for Whole Child Education. We're part of ASU's Teachers College. For years, we heard, I wish I had learned about this when I was in my teacher prep program. I wish I learned about this 10 years ago. And so now we get to partner with this incredible university and support educators of all tenures and continue to do this work. So you might see Turnaround for Children on some of our materials or our socials, as the young people say. We are officially the Center for Whole Child Education. We know that our US education system, along with many global education systems, weren't designed with this comprehensive understanding of the science of learning and development, or with this purpose of whole child education at the center. But we are optimistic about the work that can be done, because there's so much that we know now that we didn't know 5, 10, 15 years ago about the way that young people learn and develop. And it's a really exciting time, because there's tremendous opportunity for us to create the spaces that we want, that our students and young people deserve to thrive. This is an incredible opportunity for the future of teaching and learning. And we know, and we're going to focus on today, well-being, because we know that well-being fuels learning. Dr. Smith shared a little bit about myself. I'm here with my incredible colleague, Gretchen Livesey, longtime high school principal, English teacher. She's worked at the center now for about 8 years. She's in the chat. So any questions, anything you might need, she'll be sharing resources. She might be popping off of mute to share as well. I am an educator, I'm a mother, I'm a Latina. I'm coming to you from Sacramento, California, the Central Valley. So not beaches, very rural farm town. That's where I grew up. Daughter of Carmen Hernandez, granddaughter of Luis Hernandez. My family is from immigrants from Mexico, mother to Louis and Mateo. I have the privilege of being an educator and of being able to talk about what matters to me every single day. So I'm so excited to be with you today. This is a little bit about what we'll be doing. 3 objectives. This is what our time will look like. Talk about the science, the well-being index, and what you can do to support student wellness in your classroom. So you're going to leave today with multiple tools and supports that you can implement tomorrow. Not this big program, not something you have to buy, but just some micro movements, some tiny bite-sized things that you can implement starting tomorrow to support student well-being. Sound good? Okay. All right. As we dive into the neuroscience of well-being and learning, 0 to 5, how is your own well-being doing? Put it in the chat, your own well-being. 4, great, I love this. A lot of 4s, 3s, yep. Gretchen at a 5, a 7, yes, I'm here for this, wonderful. This is great. So well-being isn't like bad. It isn't a program. This is based in decades of research. As teachers, we're told what to teach, how to teach, but we're not always told how our students learn. And so today I'm just going to share some nuggets of the science of how young people learn and develop. We're going to start with a quick video. You can do a stop and jot on your notes in your phone, your journal, whatever way that you record notes for yourself. So quick, short video and stop and jot after that. Here we go.
The Science of Learning and Development Initiative came together to answer a question. What science should we pay attention to in order to understand how learning happens?
Good morning. Have a good day.
The science of learning and development is really an attempt to synthesize a huge body of knowledge that's accumulated over many, many years from the learning sciences, from psychology and anthropology and brain science, and put all of that together and understand how people, in fact, develop, and what else, and how they learn.
There are a few core principles that define all of human development. The first is malleability, the unique property of the brain to change in response to relationships and experiences. Neural tissue is the most susceptible to change of any tissue in the human body. When children are born, their brains are not fully developed. The development of the brain actually continues into young adulthood. It is relationships and experiences that drive the development of the brain. If children have the experience of adversity, they will have uneven development of foundational skills like self-regulation, relationship skills that are prerequisites for more complex skills like perseverance and self-direction. These are the children who are at risk to fall further and further behind. But what's most interesting is that a child can become a productive and engaged learner from any developmental starting point as long as we intentionally build those skills.
Turn to your table group and discuss this. Come up with a statement.
When we're able to combine social, emotional, affective, and cognitive development together, we are creating many, many more interconnections in the developing brain that enable children to accelerate learning and development.
We got this, guys. We got this.
As educators, we have an extraordinary opportunity to shape the developing brains of children and to create that kind of stimulus that drives the integration of the brain.
Life isn't all about going at it alone. We're up there to support you when you don't necessarily have the skills or tools that you need. The science.
I'm going to stop there and we're going to share this video in its entirety so you can continue to watch the entire thing if you choose. There was some nuggets there. Put in the chat something that resonated with you.
And Jasmine, as we're waiting for our colleagues to place the information in the chat, one of the things that I take away from me is like the science and the research is clear around what this needs to look like. And so I'm curious, like what you may have observed to be like the biggest misconceptions that educators have when they think about integrating well-being into academic instruction and learning and development.
Sure. Thanks for asking. We have historically separated the academic part of the day and the SEL or well-being part of the day. We have different programs and curriculum for them. There's different budgets, different professional development. When we look at the research, we see that that's not true. This is a false choice, having to choose between well-being or academics, because learning is integrated. That is not how the brain works, and that's not how the school day should work. The well-being, SEL, culture, those aren't things that are that you add on. Those are things that are embedded throughout the day. We have children and our young people are whole learners, whole people, just like us as adults, as educators. Our stress, our well-being impacts our work, and the same is true for our young people. I promise we did not practice this, but this leads me to my next point, which is Learning is integrated. Learning is a social, emotional, and cognitive process all at once. This is dynamic interplay happening in our brain. It happens within the context of our social connections and our relationships. And we know that emotions can either help or hinder learning. We have to deeply understand how the brain develops skills across development. Through work on the brain from 2 to 3 decades ago, we sought to identify specific brain regions and their unique contributions to mental processing. And so it followed naturally that based on that understanding, we thought about instruction as SEL or academics as different skill sets. But many scientists have shifted their focus to these networks of connectivity between regions that facilitate different activity modes that are important for thinking and learning. So it's not that social and emotional skills are equally as important as academic content knowledge and skills, or that they're the right thing to do by kids. It's that we physically cannot separate them in the brain. Gretchen, can you read this quote from Dr. Imardino Yang for us, please?
I sure will, Jasmine. We've, scientists, taken the mind and carved it up into two pieces. And two of those really big pieces are cognition and emotion. But actually, these are really just constructs that scientists have invented to be able to understand what's going on. But in real people, everybody, those two things are always together and only happen as a unified self of an integrated mind.
Thank you so much. So this video shows white matter tracks, those long reach connections of the human brain. The tracks are revealed here through a MRI-based method known as diffusion tensor imaging, or DTI. And I want you to just look at this video that will show how learning is integrated. Okay, this video is not starting, and that's okay, even though we just tested it right before this webinar. Not to worry, we will share the link so that you can see how interconnected the regions in the brain are. But here's another image that might show you how learning is integrated. So if here you see an image from birth, 6 years and 14 years. So most parts of the brain don't continuously create new brain cells or neurons. Instead, the brain is built and shaped over time through this process of creating, of strengthening, of pruning, and reorganizing connections between neurons. No part of the brain develops in isolation. It is structurally and functionally integrated. Here's another image for you. As researchers continue to learn about these complex networks that are involved in the process for reading and writing, the more we learn, we understand just how integrated these structural networks actually are. So as the brain learns to read, it develops and uses connections across the entire brain. So we read that quote from Dr. Imardino Yang. Let's hear a little bit more from her. She's brilliant, just about how learning is integrated.
My name is Mary Helen Imardino Yang. I'm an affective neuroscientist and an educational psychologist at the University of Southern California. And I study the ways in which children's emotional and social relationships shape their learning and also shape the brain development that undergirds their learning so that they can learn better into the future. And I'm going to start my talk with a picture of my children's jack-o'-lanterns from a few years ago. And the reason is that I think that the jack-o'-lanterns are a really fantastic visual metaphor for how children learn. Inside of each one of those little pumpkins is a fire burning, a fire that consumes oxygen and that shines out through that child's actions and through that child's beliefs and through that child's learning in the world. And, you know, historically we've thought, and scientists even thought, that emotions interfere with clear-headed thinking, that in order to learn well, we needed to get our emotions out of our thought. We needed to take ourself out of it. We needed to take our feelings out of it, and instead just focus in a kind of pure way on the cognitive skill that we're trying to develop. And what we're learning with our new neuroscientific research is that nothing could be further from the truth in the way that human brains actually learn. And this makes good sense evolutionarily, because the ordinary purpose of our brain is to keep us alive. It's to steer our actions and our thoughts and behaviors so that we remember the things that matter, so that we learn the things that we think are going to need in the future, and we don't attend to or spend a lot of time thinking about the stuff that we think doesn't matter or that we think is not important. To demonstrate what I mean, I have a little poem written by a kindergartner about her baby brother named Theodore. She calls him Teddy. And you can see a little picture of her up here with her little pink dress and crayon. And underneath, she's written out her poem. And it says, "Oh, Teddy, we love you more than the whole earth size. As the earth spins every day, we love you as much as usual, but sometimes even more, as you make us proud and happy that you're you." I have a simple question for you. Is that a poem about this little girl's love for her baby brother? Or is that a poem about her budding knowledge of planetary science? Our emotions and our relationships and our cultural experiences in the social world literally organize and shape the development of brain networks that allow us to learn. Over the course of the morning, you're going to hear from my colleagues about their work describing how children's identities, how children's emotional experiences in the learning environments they're exposed to are influencing what they're capable of doing. And I want you to take this information very seriously, because this isn't just sort of a recent fad about how people learn to make people happier or something like that. This is literally shaping and changing and recruiting brain networks for memory and emotion that will not be recruited any other way. It is literally neurobiologically impossible to think about things deeply or to remember things about which you've had no emotion.
Ooh, that last quote always gets me. And I want to highlight this quote. Emotional processes are structurally and functionally intertwined with and often the same as the cognitive capacities required for learning. Feel free to do a little stop and jot or share in the chat anything that's resonating with you from this quote or from the video.
Jazmin, I was just waiting for the opportunity to pause and reflect, because what really struck a chord with me as we have our colleagues think about points of connection is at Thrively, we talk about our hope index, right? And so when we talk about hope, we're not talking about it as an emotion, but we're talking about it as a cognitive trait. And so when I listen to what was just shared there and the connection there, um, and the video that we'll have an opportunity to look at regarding just how learning is interwoven in the brain. Like, one of the things that I'm mindful of is at Thrively, we talk about the groundbreaking research of Dr. Rick Schneider that's about hope theory in 2000. And so it keeps reminding me that the science and the research is clear on what needs to happen when we think about learning and teaching, right? We learn that hope is measurable, it's malleable, it mediates all anxiety in the brain, and it really transforms all cognitive learning functions. And now hearing another perspective of what this looks like just really resonated with me. And so one of the questions that I have really is around what what would be like two key principles, like we're talking about like the neuroscience there, like two neuroscientific principles that every educator really needs to understand about how emotions really affect learning. Like I need to break it down to myself to really understand that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Gretchen will share a link to our website, and we have a whole section on the science because there's so much I could say there, but I'll share two things. I just want to underscore stamp Dr. Amardino Yang. She's at USC. I know your alma mater, Dr. Smith. That
Shout
learning is
out Trojans forever, Trojans, Trojans.
I'm married to a Trojan, so fight on. Um, Learning is integrated. Scientists study parts of brain cognition and emotion in isolation, but both are always present. We have an integrated mind, and to think deeply and critically about something, which we ask students to do from TK to 12 and on, it requires emotion. So we cannot have a school, a classroom void of emotion, and that it is not a negative thing. We have an integrated mind. And second, I would say context matters. And we as educators have the ability to create the context in our classrooms and our schools that set young people up on a neurobiological level to learn, to help their brain get ready to learn that content that we are so thoughtfully preparing for them. Two things: context matters, learning is integrated. Great. Thanks for the question. So when we understand that learning is integrated, we can mindfully integrate these social, emotional, and cognitive skill building into academic blocks so that our students will have access to rich learning experiences. Like I said a second ago, context matters. We know that learning is integrated, and we know that stress impacts the learning brain. So cortisol is a hormone that comes from stress. It's adaptive, helps you be ready and alert, but it can also be damaging to the learning brain. But not all stress is bad. Some stress with adult support can be good for kids' development. But when this stress is intense, chronic, and not buffered by a caring adult, it can have a real negative impact on brain development. It works on our limbic system of the brain. It triggers the amygdala, here our emotions center, overwhelms the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, and it makes it very hard to focus, to pay attention, to regulate, to learn. This overwhelming stress hormone literally changes the structure and function of the learning brain. But remember what I said on my very first slide, science tells us a really optimistic story. There is good news because there is another hormone that is produced in a context of a trusting relationship called oxytocin. And these two hormones have an inverse relationship. So when oxytocin goes up, cortisol goes down. So the more support and care and trust we feel in our relationships, the more we physically turn down our biological stress response. And relationships aren't just about being nice to kids, they help us set them up on this neurobiological level to engage and to learn. And I want you to remember this: trust is the antidote to stress. So that takes us to the well-being index. We talked earlier about our own well-being, and I want you to understand that we can support students' well-being in the classroom. We cannot change what is happening outside of the classroom, but we have the ability to understand their well-being and to support it. At the Center for Whole Child Education, we have created the Well-Being Index, and we have shared this tool with Thrively, who has put it on their platform. The Well-Being Index gathers real-time data about students' feeling and functioning. We as educators often want to prioritize students' well-being, but without a specific method, we end up resorting to observable behaviors or assumptions about children that may or may not reflect our implicit bias about a child. But the WBI aims to move away from using data to label and track students and instead use data as guideposts in understanding and learning more about the whole child. Using this tool is just one way that you can learn more about your students and one step forward towards creating the conditions to help them thrive. So we have a short video here for you about Thrively's platform of our tool. 1 second, give us a moment. There we go.
Turnaround for Children and Thrively have partnered together to bring you the Well-Being Index. We take attendance every day, yet are our students ready to attend? Positive emotions such as interest and excitement open up the mind to learning when students realize they are part of a supportive environment with deep relationships with their adults. In as little as 60 seconds, you'll get a pulse check on the well-being of each and every learner in your classroom. Self-awareness is developed when well-being data is visualized in a way that makes sense to the learner. Student trend data becomes personalized and contextual. In the data dashboard for staff, relationships engage children in the human community in ways that help them define who they are, what they can become, and how and why they are important to other people. Research points to 3 common elements across settings that contribute to positive emotional development: a supportive environment, developmental relationships, and opportunities for integrated academic, skill, and mindset development. If a school creates the conditions for healthy, whole child development, we expect students to build skills and mindsets for success. We want students to believe in their capacity to learn and to be able to connect, communicate, and collaborate, as well as manage themselves and direct their actions. The power of the interactive tools in Thrively allows students to communicate clearly, cooperate with others, resist inappropriate social pressures, negotiate conflict constructively, and seek the guidance and help of others when needed. Let's move beyond attendance and attend to our students' well-being.
So at the center, formerly Turnaround, we created the Wellbeing Index because we wanted to have a tool that helped educators collect holistic student data: physical, social, psychological, and emotional well-being, in a way that was systemic, that was quick, direct, and in real time. We know that collecting this well-being data is something that educators can incorporate into their daily practice and use to personalize student supports, interactions, and experiences. Here's also another image of what it looks like on the Thrively's platform. Okay, so I want us to take a breath, one of those big box breaths. We're about 2/3 of the way through. If you're watching later, thanks for hanging with us. We can intentionally create the environments for young people to thrive. So you have the WBI, you have this data, but now what? Well, at the center, we've used data and research from science of learning and development to create this framework called the Whole Child Design Blueprint. These are practical resources, tools, strategies to generate shifts in practice, to create new experiences to foster student learning and healthy development in schools. We start with a shared purpose of this commitment to holistic development. And then here you're going to see some things that probably you are already doing in your classroom: creating supportive school and classroom environments, creating these developmental relationships between students, teachers, leaders, or community, and setting students up for success by facilitating rich learning experiences with knowledge, skill, and mindset building. And then here, the container you see: engaging in transformational change through shared leadership and ownership. A little bit about developmental relationships. Developmental relationships are like the active ingredient in any effective child serving system. They're characterized by emotional attachment, joint reciprocal interactions, progressive complexity, and balance of power. Here in our core practice, on our toolbox, you will be able to find tools for each of these different components. And I want to connect that back to the science. Remember that trust and relationships are the antidote to stress. Here's a tool that we have that Gretchen will share in a moment on our toolbox. What I love about the center and what drew me to the center when I was working in the district office and got a very similar PD from Gretchen Livesey is that you had these incredible tools that were based in the science and that they were easy to implement. So this tool is called the relational microstructures. And these are things that you can embed in your daily activities to support student relationship structures. A snowball discussion, a give one, get one, a turn and talk, a peer review. So this is super easy to use. There's a purpose, there is objectives, really quick instructions for how to use. So that's one tool that you can use to support developmental relationships. Moving to
And
supportive
Jazmin,
environments. Yes,
And
Dr.
Jazmin,
Smith.
can I just add there? And so one of the things that we thoroughly enjoy about our partnership is being able to utilize the research-based approaches to the Wellbeing Index and then developing resources here at Thrively that support educators at all different levels. And so one of the resources that we do have, and I'll make sure that we send that out as a part of our platform, is our newest feature, which is called Connection. So it relates back to what you talked about, because the research has shown that having just one trusted adult outside of your family member is going to dramatically improve the outcomes of the children in our schools. And so we created a particular feature that allows for educators to, I wouldn't say assess, but to have a deep understanding of the connections they do or do not have with the students that they interface with on a daily basis, and then utilize that information to then create interventions or supports for those particular students that may not have those strong connections with adults on campus. So I just wanted to bring that bridge to the resources that you're sharing there and the resources that we have available in Thrively, because it is this integrated approach to this work.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. So the next part of our blueprint is the supportive environments. We know that context matters, and we can create a context full of safety and belonging. And back to the science. We need safe, predictable environments to be able to learn. So here's an example of a tool that you can use to create a supportive environment. It's called the Co-Regulating Routines Planner. You'll see the purpose and directions at the top. You can identify some priority routines in your classroom and your learning space. And then you can plan routines with support for self-regulation. And then you can debrief and reflect on routines with your students, because we know that student voice is critical. So the
And
last, yes, go ahead.
if I could chime in there, Jazmin, because like as you're speaking, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing, just the connections there. And so if you wouldn't mind going back one slide there. So for those of you that are listening in now, or will be watching this back, an additional resource that supports this concept of co-regulation routines is in our Thrively resources. We've developed a social emotional learning program guide. And so that information, a link will be placed in the chat for you to be able to access that information. And it has a scope and sequence, it's standards-based align, and it's ready to be used by all of the educators to really move that work forward. And then we also have a particular playlist we call a group of lessons that we've developed playlist that is Start with the Heart. And that's a playlist that utilizes some of the information in this particular tool around co-regulating routines.
Great, I love the connections. So our final component of our blueprint is knowledge, skill, and mindset building. We know that we have to integrate this throughout the day, and the science tells us, like I've said multiple times today, that learning is integrated. We have to create successful learning experiences that intentionally include and simultaneously develop content-specific knowledge along with the skills and mindsets that students need to be successful in school and beyond. So I want to show you this final tool from the center for this knowledge, skill, and mindset building component. It's called Supporting Student Agency, Stress Management to Resilience. So this tool gives students some reflections. And I want to pause for a moment and just say, we assume, especially educators of older grades, at times, maybe students come in with these skills. But what the reality is that not all of our students do. So we can intentionally support their skill building with tools just like this one. Here's a reflection of how they're feeling, some activities of what they can do to support their stress management and to move towards resilience. So those are just a very brief overview of 3 tools that are backed by science and research that align with our blueprint that support students' well-being in the classroom, that are incredibly easy to use and implement. So
And
here,
Jasmine,
yes.
and so as I'm thinking about that as well, just wanted to create that crosswalk as well. And so if you wouldn't mind going back just one slide there, so they see that visual of supporting student strategies, stress management to resilience. As I said before, really looking at the research and the evidence, Thrively has created resources specifically around lessons that can be utilized in the classroom. And the chat is one of our resources that we call Daily Dose of Hope playlist. And so that really supports what Jazmin has talked about in the stress management to resilience. And there's also specific lessons around grit and resilience as well. And so just having I'm just finding these connected points to be able to provide those resources and supports at all different levels. And so I appreciate that.
Great. Yeah, of course. So this is a link that Gretchen's going to share in the chat, as well as a QR code to our free science-grounded toolbox that is online, available to all educators. All you have to do is sign up and make an account. Just really quick question, just so we know where you're located, the grades you are serving. We will not spam you at all. We just are collecting information, knowing where are educators that are accessing our tools. You might see a screen like this. You can go to tools by topic and find everything that we talked about today, tools for all 3 of the core practices. And I want to end with this. Young people have boundless potential. The conditions that help each child thrive can be intentionally cultivated. The science tells us a really optimistic story. We can build relationships that set up students up for learning on a neurobiological level. We can create supportive environments that build that sense of community and belonging, and we can ensure that academic instruction and student supports are most effective when they're driven by this holistic picture of the learner. We know that well-being fuels learning. I want you to share one word in the chat about the potential that you are thinking about. What is one tool that you might want to use? What is one hope that you might have for your young people after hearing about the science of learning and development and well-being today? Would love to hear from you in the chat.
And Jasmine, as we are waiting for our colleagues to pause and reflect, because this has been a wealth of information that I said at the onset may challenge us to learn, unlearn, or relearn a few different things. Just wanted to share a few things there as it relates to the tools and resources. I'm making those connections, right? Like how you said, everything is integrated. We also have additional resources that support some of the other items that you talked about with our health and wellness program guide. So we'll make sure that we have a link that's added there, as well as additional resources to support educators as they think about moving those core elements forward. We also have our character development guide as well to help our educators move this work forward. So there'll be a link in the chat to access that. And then because you talked about learning is integrated, it's not simply about well-being separately and the academic piece. We also have our daily dose of strengths playlist that really hones in on bringing everything together that you talked about. We just wanted to share that information in the chat as well. So we have flooded our colleagues with resources and opportunities to move that forward.
Thanks, Dr. Smith. I want to highlight some of the things that folks are saying in the chat of what is resonating, what they're leaving with. Continuing to help my students build hope and resilience. Feeling empowered to empower students. Robin says development is bi-directional. Using the connections feature helps to be sure all students have a caring and trusted adult. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jamie. There's some tools there. Children who have hope can learn academically and socially. Yes. So the last thing I want to share here, if you are interested in connecting with us at the center, we would love to hear from you. You can scan this QR code. Gretchen also put it in the chat. She'll also share the link to our toolbox. And I just want to end with one note. To truly transform our system, we need an integrated approach to the way that our young people develop and learn, one that's grounded in the science of how kids grow and learn, one that honors relationships, environments, and experiences. And we are here to support you with that. And I want to thank you for all that you do and will continue to do in service of our young people. All of us at the center are in awe of educators on the ground every day. Every single one of us was a practitioner in the building. And so if that was you today, we are sending you all of our deepest respect, gratitude, admiration. It was such a pleasure to be with you. If you're watching, thanks for joining. Thanks for having us, Dr. Smith. And remember, the science tells a really optimistic story about what's possible for young people.
And so, Jazmin, if I were to give like a standing ovation, I'm already standing, but just an opportunity to thank you for the opportunity to push our thinking. We do have a few minutes, and I just want to look at some of the questions that we have there. One of the things that many educators worry about is adding one more thing to their plates, right? And so if you were to think about just some practical strategies, we've listed a lot of resources there, but what practical strategies would you recommend for just seamlessly integrating well-being practices into their existing academic routines? And you modeled a few of those just through our session today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, start with reflection. Use well-being as a conversation starter during advisory or morning meeting. Embed a check-in into your existing routines. Do a quick pulse check before a reading or a math lesson. This isn't something extra. We don't want you to feel like it's one more thing. We want you to think of it as setting up your students on a neurobiological level for learning, creating environments that in which they can thrive, which is what all of us as educators hope for our young people. So think about your day, think about small places where you can begin to reflect as an educator and with your students, and use well-being as a conversation starter for that.
No, absolutely. And I think you may have already touched base on this, but I'll ask it just to see if there's another entry point for that. So for schools that may just be starting to focus on student well-being, and you talked about the well-being index that you all created, that we digitized and placed on the Thrively platform, we know that academic instruction cannot take place until we understand how our students are feeling and functioning, until we understand who our students are. We like to say we know our students by name, need, strength, aspiration, and what they bring into the classroom each day. And so for schools that are starting to focus on that or just beginning in that space, what would you recommend as a first step for them in creating this more balanced approach to academics and emotional support?
I'll open it up to my colleague. Gretchen, do you have anything to share? If not, I'm happy to jump in, but I wanted to give space for your voice.
I'm so sorry, everybody. I seem to have been dropping links just to the hosts and the panelists. So, Jazmin, I'm sorry. I'm busy right now trying to go back and follow.
No problem at all.
Thank you. I'll jump in a
No problem. Okay, we want to make sure you get those links. Know that they're coming. They will be shared to everybody.
And we will be sending out a follow-up email with all of the resources, all of the links that were shared. And so if they didn't catch it today, they'll be able to have that all in one place on that follow-up email.
Sure. Sure. Okay, so very short answer because I'm looking at our time and happy to talk more. And if you're all interested in connecting with us, please do that. But one thing that you can do is check out our website. We have our whole child design inventory. This is a tool that helps you reflect on your own classroom, on your own school, what are strengths, what are areas of growth, how you can leverage your strengths as an educator in your own space, in your own classroom or school. And then what are some small steps that you can take to build those, to deepen and build those relationships, to create those supportive environments, and to integrate knowledge, skill, and mindset building, that academic and that culture. So I highly recommend that you look at that tool. And I will pause there. Dr. Smith, any other questions? I'm looking at our time and want to make sure that I give you another minute or so.
Oh, sounds good. I'm looking there, no other questions. And so I'm going to just close us out today. First, I want to thank you, Jazmin. I want to thank you, Gretchen. I want to thank the team at the Center for Whole Child Education just for joining us today, for sharing your insights and perspectives. As I said, challenging us to think differently, learn, unlearn, relearn. I'm inviting everyone to mark your calendars for our next webinar. That's going to be on April 1st. And then if you are interested in learning more about asset-based learning, about strengths-based education, we encourage you to email us directly at thrive@thrively.com, or you can visit us on the web, so thrively.com/classrooms for more resources. And you can follow us on social media platforms, so LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram at Team Thrively. So many ways to get connected to us. And again, I just want to thank each of you for just the privilege of your time. And until next time, what we say at Thrively is let's continue to create those strengths-based, joyful, and hopeful classrooms and humanize learning together. So thank you all on behalf of Thrively and for the Center for Whole Child Education, everyone.
Thank you all. Take good care. Remember those breaths. And thank you, John. That was very kind. And thanks for having us, Thrively team and Dr. Smith.
We appreciate you. Thank you all.